1, 2, 3, 4.
This is Chris Frantz, Hall of Fame drummer of the Talking Heads and Tom Tom Club, as well as accomplished producer and now author. He just released a brand new memoir called Remain in Love. Please go out and buy it immediately. You won't be sorry. You can find it everywhere on July 21st. If you're a fan of the 70s New York punk scene crossing over into what was called the New Wave, you will love this reading. Chris goes into detail about his start as a musician, his love for the Beatles, R&B, reggae music, and his time spent at RISD Art School where he met David Byrne, and his future wife-to-be as well as fellow bandmate Tina Weymouth. This book will detail the path from Kentucky to Pittsburgh to Rhode Island to New York and finally Connecticut. He highlights the victories and trials of Talking Heads, and then the overflowing fun and freedom of Tom Tom Club, as well as his experience producing many other well-known artists. Chris's drumming style is laced with influences from rock and roll acts like the Beatles, the Stones, the Animals, the Dave Clark Five, and the Ventures, as well as soul and R&B groups like Booker T and the MGs, James Brown, and Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Also Afrobeat artists like Fela Kuti, Manu Dibango, and countless reggae artists. You can clearly hear all of these influences melt into his playing through his entire discography. Personally, for me, his playing on Remain in Light is at the top. He's really hitting his stride with the soul, Afrobeat, and reggae influences in his songs like the hyper Cross-Eyed and Painless, the tribal Born Under Punches, and the island feel of Houses in Motion. Speaking of reggae influence, Chris and Tina would later go on to produce Bob's son, Ziggy Marley, in the 1988 full-length entitled Conscious Party, featuring the hit single Tomorrow People. Remember that one? That was a hit. The release was received with high praise, including a Grammy Award for Ziggy and his band. Of course, later radio hits like Burning Down the House, Stay Up Late, and Wild Wild Life were all a bold reminder of his rock-solid meter and knack for memorable fills and patterns, such as past hits like Psycho Killer, Pulled Me Up, and Life During Wartime. When Chris and Tina created Tom Tom Club, it felt like he was really able to spread his wings and be his funkiest best. Recording in the Bahamas at Compass Point with a no-rules-on-creativity approach, they, as a team, created groundbreaking new sounds and beats which were to be sampled across Billboard genres for decades to come. Using organic layers like overdubbing human claps instead of machines, and the vocal help of Tina's sisters, this record was destined to be a landmark going forward in the industry. On a more drummy note, during his time in the New York scene, there were much more straightforward punk grooves going on, 2 and 4 beats, or 4 on the floor. I would say Chris's funkier laid-back style had an influence on many hip-hop artists going forward. He's a very underrated drummer in rock history. Listening back to his catalog, a consistent theme in his playing involves a snare-to-tom pattern, like so. Kick, snare, tom, kick, snare, tom, but in many different variations and tempos. To me, this pattern was completely recognizable. This, of course, is selling his genius too short, but if I were to open up a chapter in the Drum God's book called Chris Frantz, this is what I would hear in my head. Although Chris has been the backbone of 2 of the most influential bands in rock and roll history, he is still very humble and appreciative of his fans and his influence. Maybe his time has passed with Talking Heads, or maybe not, you never know. But he continues to create music with his wife Tina in Tom Tom Club, as well as produce other artists. They are also both heavily involved in their local Connecticut community. I was so honored that Chris agreed to spend some time with me. Here he is. Okay, sweet. About 75%. I'm able to teach, I'm able to work, but there are dips, in life, and every day is a struggle. So I was like, I'm just going to reach out to my drum heroes and put something positive out there. The people who maybe want to play drums in the first place,
Oh, cool.
And pretty much like all of them have said sure, and I was like, I've been blown away. Like very select few, it inspired me when I'm self-taught, so I
Uh-huh.
remember going to the library and and checking out your vinyl stuff back in the day.
Oh yeah.
So it's been like really cool, and there's been a great response. Like, just sharing stories, and I mean, you've played forever, and I'm sure you have a couple things to add. But I did listen to a podcast recently. I'm not going to go through your whole life story. It was very in depth. Your friend Bob, it went from like day one all the way to the end.
Oh, Bob Lefsetz.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Uh,
pretty cool. Very detailed.
yeah. He, he's quite something.
Yeah. And it's also helping me. I'm not much of a talker. I'm a rock guy, so it's like helping me with vulnerability and just I don't know. There's so many places you can find bad news these days. I was just trying to do something positive.
Well,
Um, but specifically, like either my drum heroes or drummers who had like their own sound, which you are definitely both of those. And
well,
and
thanks.
relearning your records has been really therapeutic in my recovery as well. So I thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Especially since I come from bands that are 90s and in the 2000s where everything's bashing all the time, 100% bash bash bash, and the screamers screaming. It's just 100% no dynamics, And now I'm playing in little funk bands and R&B, stuff, and it's making me listen to the band more. And I'm not quite to that level where I could just go 2 hours of 8 kick drums on the floor. I'm still working my way back. So
Yeah, well, it sounds to my way of thinking that maybe you're working in the right direction.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so you definitely have a recognizable style, and you and Tina were both self-taught. Is that correct?
Well, I was in my elementary school band.
Yeah.
I started playing the trumpet, and the trumpet wasn't really working out for me
Yeah.
at all. And so I had a very perceptive drum teacher or band teacher.
Yeah.
He was a mallet instrument guy. He did play drums, but his specialty was like marimba. And so anyway, he said, yeah, I can see it's not working out for you. Oh, he played like vibraphone and marimba and xylophone and anything with mallets.
Yeah.
But he said I can see the trumpet's not working out for you, but what do you say we switch you to the drums, because I think you have a pretty good sense of rhythm.
Yeah.
And I said I'd love that. Cool. So I was very frustrated with the trumpet, and he gave me the little drum pad, with little slanted rubber pad, and
Yeah.
a
Doing
pair of
rudiments.
a pair of sticks and a book of rudiments, and he showed me. He gave me a couple of lessons, sort of private lessons, and showed me the most elementary stuff, and said start practicing. So I did, and I really enjoyed it, and I moved. I moved from the horn section to the drum section, and I did well.
Yeah.
It was very positive experience, and so. But then when I got a drum kit, eventually, thanks to my parents, on Christmas, when I was like 12 years old, it was a little Slingerland drum kit. It didn't even have a hi-hat. It just. I think my dad didn't really know when he ordered the drum kit. He didn't know, oh, I should order a hi-hat to go with it.
Right.
So
that looks like a drum kit. That looks something like something. Yeah.
But I got started on that, and that was a whole different thing, because I'd never had tom toms and a bass drum and a little cymbal before. It was always just a snare drum, or in the school band, we played like one thing, the snare or a tom-tom or a ride cymbal, but not all at the same time. And then the Beatles came out, and changed our world. and every kid in my every kid I knew that played music wanted to be in the Beatles or wanted to be like one of the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I formed a little band with some friends of mine who were also in the school band. The leader of the band, my friend Lloyd, played trumpet, but he was also the lead singer. And another friend played trombone, and then we had bass and drums and rhythm guitar, and we played
Beatles covers.
Yeah, we played some Beatles covers, but more often we played like covers by the Dave Clark Five or the Animals.
Yeah.
Or we could, because we had horns, we could do Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass covers, because they were very, extremely popular. That was the time of that famous album Whipped Cream.
Mm-hmm.
And they had big hits, so we would play those songs. And the Ventures, I love the drumming on the Ventures.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the fellow's name, but he was great.
That surf beat, that consistent surf beat, Beach Boys, Ventures, the Beatles. Yeah. That's part of like a foundation of what I'm trying to teach the really young kids.
Oh, you're teaching, are you?
Yeah, it's called Loud House. I mean, all the parents it's all Zoom these days, but it's really young, like from 6 to 17. And I've done a couple of your songs too. Like Psycho Killer. I have a couple girl bass players. So
cool.
Introduce that, Genius Love and stuff like that.
Well, my kids think, and my two sons, it wasn't until they were about 20 years old that they realized that bass was not just for girls.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I felt so. And then you probably played school dances and public events and stuff like that.
The band, that first band I was in that I was telling you about was called the Lost Chords. A really good name, I think.
Yeah.
And we only had one gig ever. It was like the straightest gig you could possibly imagine. It was a dance at the Presbyterian Church Youth Fellowship. Yeah, they had a very nice place for the young people in the basement of the church, and that's where they even had a little stage, and that was where our first and only gig was. And
usually churches have money for a sound system and a stage and stuff like that.
Yeah, they had that. Yeah. And although these were early days, we're talking about 1960, probably 5.
Yeah.
And people didn't know what the hell a PA system was. We had, I think we brought it all ourselves, and we had a couple little columns that the vocals would come through.
Yeah.
That was it. Nothing else was mic'd or anything. It was all just heads down, turn it up.
Yeah. When I first discovered you, I fell in love with new wave music. I grew up on the beach in LA, and there's K-Rock 106.7.
Oh yeah.
KLOS 95.5.
Rodney on the Rock.
Rodney on the Rock. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure he was championing you guys from the day one.
We were very fortunate because he liked us.
Mm-hmm.
And he would play our records, and everybody at K-Rock was very good to our band.
So there were these bands like that I fell in love with: Pretenders, you guys, B-52s, Waitresses, Devo, Blondie, The Motels, Adam and the Ants, Bow Wow Wow, U2, Gary Newman. It's like punk is coming out and now synthesizers are coming in, and it was kind of blowing my mind. And I grew up on the beach, so there was surfer magazines everywhere, and they always had music sections. So at lunch, I'd sit and read surfer, and I didn't surf. I'd read Surfer magazine for their music section, and there'd be like a profile of you guys or B-52s or Pretenders or whatever. And that combined with MTV just starting to explode, was like the perfect combination for me. It's like I just needed music all the time, and I started teaching myself the drums, and there was something about that sound that was just so unique, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82. Things were like really changing to this new wave sound. And I heard recently in a clip from Seymour Stein, did he actually create that term, new wave?
Well, it comes from French cinema, Nouvelle Vague, which means new wave. And that was to describe, Jean-Luc Godard and Truffaut and
Truffaut
filmmakers like that. They used real light, and they used real locations instead of sets, and it was just a new way of doing things. And Seymour had encountered this problem. He had a number of bands that were being called punk.
Yeah.
The Ramones in particular, who pretty much invented the medium, although I don't think they ever called themselves punk. And we certainly never called ourselves punk.
No.
But he also had Richard Hell and the Voidoids and the Dead Boys, and so he encountered a problem with the radio programmers at stations such as K-Rock, but all across America there were radio program directors who created the playlists, and their attitude was, we don't play punk music, we only play good music. And so Seymour got his promotion men, his team of promotion men that went to the radio stations with the records, to say, oh, but Talking Heads, they're not punk, they're new wave.
Yeah.
And that was Seymour's idea, and it worked, because the program directors would say, oh, they're new wave, well, I guess we can play new wave.
Right.
And then we all of a sudden we started getting some airplay, and it wasn't like it all happened overnight, but that it's funny how those little marketing terms, people take them seriously.
Definitely not punk. I mean, you and the Ramones and the whole CBGB's New York scene, and then you went out on tour with the Ramones, and I was wondering, how was that received? I'm sure you guys were friends after a while playing CBGB so much, but when you went on the road and there was a Ramones crowd, were you received well?
That particular tour was in Europe and the UK, and at least at that particular time, the audiences were receptive to both Talking Heads and the Ramones. The Ramones were the headliner, and they had an entire album out. All we had was a little single called "Love Goes to Building on Fire," and but that little single was getting airplay like in Holland and Belgium and France, and also the UK, and just on the strength of that one single, we were able to do the tour. But it wasn't just the single; it was also the fact that we came from CBGBs, and that we were part of this new movement of music coming from downtown New York. And in Europe, they were particularly thirsty for this. I'm not sure how the word got out, but the word was out. Like when we hit the stage in Paris, you would have thought, we'd been performing in Paris for years already. And it was my first time ever to set foot in France. So
exciting. Yeah,
it was exciting. And the Ramones were such an exciting show. And together, I mean, looking back on it now, it's one of the, if not the greatest double bill of all time, it's one of the most unusual double bills of all time.
You got your money's worth on that ticket.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the price of that ticket, that tour.
Oh, I think it was like $2.
Oh God,
It
jeez.
wasn't very much.
Um, so I just have a tiny little funny story, like how I found you guys and how it inspired me to want to create music. If I can indulge a little bit. So,
Sure.
like I said, I found you in the Remain in Light era, and um, I was forced to be on that summer. MTV exploded, and the video came out. Once in a Lifetime came out. So, and I hated my mom and stepdad forced me to be on swim team, but I hated it. The only reason I did it is because they did a river rafting trip every year. So even though I'd like win swimming awards and stuff, I just couldn't stand it. I didn't want to get up early in the morning and do all the workouts. But I'd go on this river rafting trip, and the video came out like a week before, and that song just got lodged in my. I'm sure if you've ever had a song that just never leaves your brain for like weeks and you don't know what to do about it. And the thing about it was I'm on the water constantly, and even at the hotel, I'm in the pool constantly, and those lines keep running through my head over and over again. And it's just like it was like this this synchronicity of it, just like there's with the video and the song combined with the lyrics at that part of my youth was like I don't know, it was crazy. It was a euphoric thing. So and then following your videos after that, there was definitely a theme. Your videos always seem to be in high rotation. I always associate your videos with summertime for some reason, because MTV was just cranking, and I would watch a lot of MTV in the summertime. And all your videos were always kind of left of center and had a lot of humor, but they're spooky at the same time. It kind of left you with an impression. Even if you're walking through the room, you're like, what's going on there? That's a little jagged. So really creative. You just don't see stuff like that anymore.
Well, that's true.
And then from then I had to work my way back. And when I worked my way back, checking stuff out from the library, it's like, I've heard this song before, like from somewhere, it's like, I'm not doing any research. I've heard this at barbecues or whatever. And that song Cross-Eyed and Painless, like if that song doesn't make you move around, and I'm not a dancer, like you're not human. There's this thing, there's this energy, this rhythm going on in that song that just makes you want to run to the hills and dance with wolves. It's the extra percussion. It's so cool, so unique. Maybe it's like
the rhythm of that song, Cross-Eyed and Painless, was at least my playing on it wasn't totally inspired by a song called There Was a Time by James Brown. A live version, which is on the James Brown Live at the Apollo album. And when we recorded Remain in Light, it was all there were no songs written before we went into the studio. We wrote the whole thing in the studio by creating interlocking parts that much later had vocals added to them. And the challenge for me was to make each song like a different kind of groove than the previous song on that record, but to have it be interesting and compelling enough to be kind of exciting. So I remember I recorded that particular drum part from top to bottom all by myself out in the studio. And it's basically performing a loop, we didn't have looping technology then, but that's what I was doing. And
it moves like a James Brown song for sure. It moves like a live James Brown song.
Yeah. So that was the inspiration for that particular song for the drum part. And then what Tina and Jerry and David added on top of it, I think, was more inspired by Afrobeat music, Fela Kuti or Manu Dibango. And it was a lovely synthesis.
I think with your sound, with your R&B feel that you have, Chris's sound, there's also a lot of patience. There is a jammy feel where you open up so much space for the other players, And these days, with the impatience of radio and everything's a 3-minute hit, or drummers who want to show off because they've been to Berkeley or whatever, it's very unique to have these like 6, 7, 8 minute songs, and the drummers just being so patient, just laying it down, so the other ones can fill in the creative space. And your style is very unique like that. Especially live, it's like, how much longer do I have to be back here? 20 minutes on the same groove, takes so much discipline.
Well, that kind of came, Tommy Ramone was a big inspiration to me in that his drumming was, the original drummer for the Ramones. Mm-hmm. His drumming was what I would call, I went to art school, so I would call it minimalist. Yeah. There was nothing flashy about it, yet it was really driving the song. And before that, I had, I had been playing drums for a while, but I was playing more fills and more kind of attempting to be a little bit flashy now and then. But after I saw Tommy Ramone, I said, "Oh man, that's for the birds. I'm just going to lay down this simple groove and we'll see what happens." And I noticed that people start when you keep the groove kind of basic, kind of simple, but also very driving, then people get up and dance in the audience. And all of a sudden, an audience that was kind of just sitting there listening gets up and starts moving around. And I thought, oh, well, this is the desired effect. Yeah. And so I was encouraged to continue that kind of minimalist style. But my other big inspirations were, I loved Ringo and I loved Charlie Watts, and I was amazed by John Bonham and Led Zeppelin. Yeah. But I also loved Southern R&B. So, like the Booker T and the MGs and Otis Redding and Sam and Dave. And I found out that the drummer on those records was a guy named Al Jackson Jr. And he's still probably my favorite drummer of all time.
I can hear all those influences in your playing.
Yeah.
Nice amalgam stuff.
And I loved the Motown drummer Benny Benjamin also, but I didn't even know, his name was never on the records or anything. So as a kid, I didn't know, who the heck he was. The only reason I knew Al Jackson Jr. is because on Booker T and the MGs, he was a member of the band and they put his name on the records,
Yeah.
And then later he played with Al Green, who I also adored. And, I somehow related to that kind of Southern style R&B more so than I would have expected,
Yeah. Speaking of drummers showing off a little bit, when you were in the studio, did you overdub the tom fills on Burning Down the House, or did you just do that all live? It sounds like two kits almost.
The concert toms on Burning Down the House, I brought in our percussionist, Steve Scales is his name. And if you've ever seen Stop Making Sense, he's the percussionist, and he played with us he started in 1980 and he played with us up till he continued with Tom Tom Club even after Talking Heads started working. Yeah. Stopped working. And he played with Tina Turner and he played with Brian Ferry and he Ashford and Simpson. But I knew that the song was almost finished. Those concert toms were the last thing to go on the song. And I rented them from SIR. And I said, Steve, come on in. And because I could have played something, but I knew that Steve was a drummer in the Marine Corps. You know,
Okay.
I mean, he had played.
Right on the click.
He had been standing out there in Vietnam on the tarmac, waiting for congressmen to arrive from the United States, so he could play, you know, the Star Spangled Banner or whatever.
Wow.
So Steve came in. He listened to the song a couple of times, and he added those fills, those concert tom fills that really took, to my way of thinking, took the song up to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I mean, between you and him, it's that drum track is like one of the most recognizable drum tracks. If you were just to play the drum track by itself,
Yeah, people
you know,
people
eight
would
out
know.
of 10 people, I know what song that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Another groove I love is the what you have going on with the rim shot and the hi hat in Houses in Motion. The double stroke, and then the second time around it lands on the rim shot. It's a very, you know, that reggae influence is really cool. Detailed. Yeah.
Yeah, I love reggae drumming, and you know, reggae was a big influence on our other band, Tom Tom Club.
Yeah. Is there a favorite song that you love to play live, or something that's challenging enough that you have to pay attention more? You know, you're touring night after night.
Sometimes I invent these parts that are you have to, because they're highly repetitive. You have to kind of go into a trance.
Yeah.
And those can be a challenge, because sometimes there's a distraction, or if you just have, I'm sure you know the feeling, especially when you're working the hi-hat. It's like if you make one little mistake,
Yeah.
you almost have to stop and start over again, which is very embarrassing.
Live, yeah, for sure. I mean, studio,
Yeah.
it's stressful enough to keep that pattern up, but live, you're like,
Yeah.
can't stop.
So, but anyway, I to be honest, I try to create parts now for myself that I can play in my sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be rude and just and edit this out. I guess we have 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna skip through some other stuff if you don't mind. And when I edit this, I'm gonna really plug the book before the interview starts.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna plug it at the end. We'll mention that a little bit.
Yeah.
I really relate. I heard a story about, you know, you and Tina. I think it was after Remain in Light. I don't think it was before. So you start Tom Tom Club, and that, you know, you have these hits, and you're not David's little friends anymore. You know, I've been through that before, where I've been on a, have you met Howie Klein? He's a friend of Seymour Stein.
Yes, I knew Howie Klein when he was at KSAN in San Francisco. He was the guy that was in charge of all the punk and new wave bands that would come to the station.
He signed my band in '96 called Muzzle, and he was actually our A&R rep. So he could pull some weight. Anyway, we did that band for a while, and it was like alternative pop punk stuff. But I wrote also. I played several instruments, and I always had ideas. But I remember 3 years into it, you know, I put all this work in, and I'm writing also, and I was kicked out because I had too many ideas.
Oh, wow.
So the first thing I did is I went down to a friend's studio, and I recorded a cassette tape demo with me playing all the parts, just these little pop songs. Ended up getting on the radio in like a week, and it totally outplayed the other band on the radio. And I was just like, yes, you know, vindication. You know, so I really enjoyed that part. You know, like, you guys are so creative, you're so talented, and here was your outlet, and it paid off.
Yeah.
And it paid off on K-Rock, not only alternative radio, but pop radio down in LA. And I remember Musical Youth, Past the Dutch, it came out really close, and they were almost in tandem on the airways, and it totally worked.
Yep.
It was really cool. Another summertime.
Those are very exciting times for us. And, you know, we had no intention of, when we did Tom Tom Club, our hand was sort of forced. We had no intention of doing anything outside of Talking Heads. But then our lead singer, David Byrne,
Yeah.
announced that he was doing a solo album, which would end up being called The Catherine Wheel. It's a great record. We played a couple of the songs on the tour that became known as Stop Making Sense. And then Jerry heard David was doing a solo album, so he said, "Oh, if David's doing a solo album, I'm going to do a solo album." So then Jerry was doing a solo album. Tina and I said, what are we going to do? And our accountant, very nice guy, said, "Well, Chris and Tina, you better do something or you're going to be broke," because that big Remain in Light tour, which was a very successful and critically acclaimed tour around the world a couple of times, with like 20 people, including the band and crew. At the end of it, there was nothing left. I think we broke even. I think maybe Tina and I each earned for like a year and a half's work about $1,000 a piece. So, yeah. So we said, what are we going to do? And our manager went to Chris Blackwell of Island Records, who was a friend of his. So our manager had he had worked with Bob Marley and the Wailers in the United States. He had managed Toots and the Maytals. He had managed Peter Tosh. And so he and Blackwell understood each other and liked each other. And our manager, his name was Gary Kurfürst. Gary said to Chris, Chris and Tina would like to make a record. What can you do for them? And Chris Blackwell said, well, I like Chris and Tina, and I understand the value of a good rhythm section. Why don't they come down to Compass Point, where we had already made 2 records with Talking Heads? Why don't they come down to Compass Point in the Bahamas and make a single? And if I like the single, then they can make a whole album. So we
Wordy Rapping Hood.
We made Wordy Rapping Hood, yes. And Wordy Rapping Hood went top 10 in at least 7 countries in Europe, and in Latin America it did very well. Like it was #1 in Argentina and also Mexico for weeks. And we sold a lot of records. And then Chris said, well, let's make a whole album. And we said, we'd love to. And we pretty much moved to the Bahamas for a while. And we, Tina and I did the basic tracks. And then we invited Adrian Belew to come down and record, overdub some guitars on what we had already done. And Tina's 2 sisters, Laura and Lonnie.
No one like Adrian Belew to make a guitar sound nothing like a guitar.
Yeah, he can play for sure.
Oh yeah,
and
just the effects.
We were very fond of Adrian, and because we'd done this big tour with him, and he was from Kentucky like me, so I had a real soft spot for Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, he really fit that band live, from his, because I was really attracted to the 3-colored King Crimson records in the 80s, and all his animal noises and just thinking outside the box. It totally fit Talking Heads, I thought.
Yeah.
And his energy on stage, just really added to it.
Yeah.
Say, concerning the theme of the channel, you've been playing for so long, and I'm sure it's been, hard on your joints. Or have you ever dealt on a tour with some nagging injury, or had a certain routine that you did to warm up or warm down, stuff like that? Yeah.
Along back when we were touring what became known as the Stop Making Sense tour.
Yeah.
It was actually called the Speaking in Tongues tour, but then we made the movie Stop Making Sense, and I got tendonitis in my right arm, my right forearm, up here. and that was a real drag because I often felt like, oh my God, I can't hold on to the sticks even.
Yeah.
But I always managed to hang on. But at the end, I'd have to soak in ice and soak my arm in ice, and it was not fun. But I was fortunate because, unlike bands like U2 and Bruce Springsteen, like I had a little chat one time in Paris with Max Weinberg, Bruce drummer, and Max showed me, he has to play those like 4-hour sets, and fortunately I never had to do that. but he showed me he'd had surgery on all of his knuckles on both hands. He had like little X's where the scar tissue, where it had been sewn up, and but it worked. The surgery worked. He was very happy about that. But I think he had it done. I think he told me he had it done 7 times.
Oh my God.
Hands. And I know that Larry from U2 has had bad problems. And I remember seeing, I think it was one of the drummers for Pearl Jam. I think it was Matt Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Who's now playing with Bob Dylan.
Wow.
I saw Matt after a Pearl Jam show, and he was soaking both of his arms in buckets of ice. It's one of those occupational hazards.
Very common area right there. That, and the carpal tunnel to the wrist.
Yeah.
Monthly deep tissue. I never used to drink water. Now I'm drinking water constantly. That's a big deal. Magnesium was like a miracle cure for me.
Oh yeah.
I was on a tour in Australia called Soundwave with Duff, and the band's called Loaded, and the sticks were falling in my hands. It was 100 degrees every day, totally dehydrated. I was cramping up, sticks falling out, and I saw an Australian massage therapist after the show, and he's like, start taking magnesium immediately. Next day, gone. It's crazy. Just over the counter.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Do you sorry, go ahead.
I have a powdered drink called Calm.
Yeah.
It also works to calm you down, magnesium, if you're stressed.
Yeah.
And but it's such an important mineral,
It's part of my daily power pack. Do you do yoga or meditation or anything like that?
Not really.
Yeah.
I do stretch. My Tina does yoga, and Tina's very. I do like today. My little workout routine was very simple. I took a nice long walk outside, and then I came home and I just stretched for a good half an hour. I don't have so much tightness in my arms. I get tightness in my calves and my hamstrings, which are kind of important when you're playing a bass drum.
Yeah.
With your foot.
I have this stretch where I lie on the floor and I run my leg right up against the door frame to make it really straight. And then I don't have to try so hard, like bending over and touching your toes. It's a lot easier. That helps a lot.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. And it's important to take care of yourself. I mean, let's face it. Musicians are not exactly known for taking good care of themselves, but I think
well, drummers are athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
If I don't get off the stage drenched in sweat, I don't think I've done my job. You weren't walking around the neighborhood with your marching drum, were you?
No. Have you seen that video?
That was really funny. That was cool.
Yeah, I do that. I didn't do it this year because of the COVID-19 situation, but I lead the kids parade on the 4th of July in our little town here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And they always I start off at the front and I end up at the back of the parade because all these little kids on their bikes and wagons go whizzing by me.
Oh gosh. I forgot this one a stupid musical question that I'll insert with an edit, but when you were at Compass Point and you were building the Tom Tom Club stuff, when you were building Genius of Love, the claps, was that a Lindrum or was that an Akai sampler, or how did you get that thick clap sound?
No. Those are humans.
Whoa.
And there were 4 of us: Tina, myself, Sly Dunbar, and Robbie Shakespeare. There were 2 studios at Compass Point, and Sly and Robbie we were in one doing Tom Tom Club, and Sly and Robbie were in the other one working with Grace Jones.
Wow.
And so when that was the last thing we added on Genius of Love, I'm pretty sure.
The last thing.
Wow. Yeah. And there were 4 of us in the studio, and the track was 8 minutes long. Mm-hmm. We later edited it down, but it was 8 minutes long, so we,
Yeah.
Boy, were my hands sore. And then the engineer, Stephen Stanley, said, "Okay, one more time." And we all clapped again. And he did 4 tracks of 4 people clapping, and then bounced it down to 1 track. And it's a very shall we say, dramatic hand clap sound.
Again, very recognizable. It's been sampled so many times.
Yeah.
But just like with Pass the Dutchie and Genius of Love being on the radio, the video for Genius of Love, and don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure Atomic Dog, George Clinton video, came out around the same time, and with the same animation style and the same claps. I was almost like, is this the same drum track? Is crazy, but isn't, again, MTV, I think they know what they're doing.
The drum track for Genius of Love was, in fact, inspired by Zapp. And Zapp was a band from Ohio. They did not end well, unfortunately, but their hit, More Bounce to the Ounce, was produced by Bootsy Collins, the famous bass player from P-Funk. And I loved that groove. And before we recorded Genius of Love, I said, look, this is what I want to create something like this, because I love the fact that it was slower. A lot of dance music at that time was very up tempo, and this was like slow and real funky. And I just thought, well, let's use that as a jumping off point. And the songs in the end sound nothing alike, but More Bounce to the Ounce was the inspiration for that groove. And now let me see. We knew George Clinton through Bernie Worrell, our keyboard player, who was a part of the P-Funk mob. But I can't remember when Atomic Dog. I think Atomic Dog came a little bit later.
A little later, not too far though.
Yeah,
very similar.
Yeah,
especially if you watch the videos, it's the same kind of.
Well, the video was created by first of all, the guy who did our album cover, Jimmy Rizzi, who's a friend of ours, and his drawings were in a style that Tina called urban primitive. And he did our album cover, and then when the album took off, it was doing so well, everybody said, well, we got to have a video. So we sent Jimmy Rizzi over to London to work with a couple. They were a married couple, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, and they had a company called Cucumber Studios. And they, for example, they did Max Headroom.
Yeah.
And they had done a lot of television commercials, and later they even did feature films. But they were into animation. They understood and they loved animation. So under their supervision, They were the directors. Jimmy did like literally thousands of drawings, which were animated to make that video. It was really done by hand. It wasn't computer animated or enhanced at all.
That's what made it so cool, so organic.
Yeah, and it was done on real film, shot on film, not video. And
that dog, was that your idea? Wasn't it the dog saying James Brown? James Brown, the dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that yellow dog is that we had the engineer Stephen Stanley, who was a young Jamaican guy in his early 20s, and then we had the assistant engineer Benji Armbruster, who was a little older than Stevie but still very young and vital and from the Bahamas. And he used to say to me, "Chris, relax, you can't rush life." Okay, good words to live by. But Benji used to, Stevie was very light-skinned black person. And Benji used to refer to him, he used to say, "You little yellow doggy," teasing him. They in fact had great love for each other. But that's how that little yellow dog appeared in the video.
That's funny. Such a memorable video. It's so creative. One more question, and then we're going to do book stuff. On the Stop Making Sense, was that well rehearsed and everything was linear as things were being rolled out, and as the show was building and building and building and becoming more of this extravagant, production? Or was it edited? I mean, as a viewer, it seems like, wow, this is so cool. They're piecing it together as they go. Sorry if I didn't know the background on this. Like it starts out just David. And then it's David and Tina, right? And then here you come, they're rolling the drums out. Everything's mic'd. Is that just the way the concert went?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
That's exactly how the concert went. It started with an empty stage.
Mm-hmm.
It was so funny. People would come in. Sometimes people would get angry in the audience. They're like, "I paid $20 for this. There's nothing on the stage.
There's ladders back there. There's workmen with knee pads on, and there's people working. Where's the production value?"
People used to freak out, and then David would come out and do his thing, and each member of the band would join him song by song. It was a great build.
And it had a little, to me, added some spookiness to it just because of the colors and the lighting. So it made total sense that Jonathan Demme, was involved, to create that vibe. Okay, Remain in Love. It's been delayed, right, because of everything that's going on. Do you know the exact date?
Yes, July 21st.
Can you hold the book up again for me?
It's coming right up.
Yeah.
This is the American copy. There's also a UK European copy, which has a slightly different cover, but by the same artist. That's me and Tina.
Yeah, I bought mine. Just waiting on it.
Good.
I've seen some comments on your Facebook of people asking questions, and you're like, "Read the memoir." And I'm like, chock full of the era that I fell in love with rock and roll. There's chock full of the era of bands, I'm pretty sure, in there that you'll describe in detail. So everyone who loves that time period, everyone who loves the Tom Tom Club, Talking Heads, Tina Weymouth, Chris France, I mean, you will be satisfied. So go to your local bookseller, run down to the bookshop, buy this thing.
Yes, that's a good way to get it at your local bookstore.
I really appreciate the time, Chris. If there's anything you need in the Seattle area, don't hesitate to ask.
Oh, thanks. Are you still in touch with Duff?
Yeah.
Well, send him my regards. He probably won't remember this, but I know Jerry Harrison worked with him in that band Velvet Revolver.
Yeah.
But one time with Tom Tom Club, we were doing, I think this must have been 88. Was Guns N' Roses around then?
Yeah, 87, I think, when it exploded. Yep.
Okay. So it was 88. We were in Los Angeles with Tom Tom Club doing a residency. So we were in town for like 2 weeks, and we stayed at the Riot House, the Hyatt on Sunset.
Yeah.
At one time, Tina and I came back late at night, and we were getting into the elevator, and this big roadie was. I know he doesn't drink anymore.
No.
But, this big roadie was like guiding Duff into the elevator. All of a sudden on the PA system, not PA system, but the music system of the hotel, a Guns N' Roses, I think "Sweet Child of Mine" came off or something, and Duff said, "That's my band. That's my fucking band." And Tina and I were like, "Yes, we know." Yeah.
Have you seen his movie about his recovery?
I have not.
I'm actually in it. It's called "It's So Easy and Other Lies." It was a book, and then they made it into a movie. It's kind of along the Stop Making Sense vibe, but people come out one at a time. It was done at the Moore Theater in Seattle, and there's animation involved. It basically tells his life story from his life story, and then his recovery, sobriety, and stuff like that up to the current time. It's pretty cool.
Good for him.
Yeah, he's like the biggest. He's the best big brother I could have asked for.
Well, give him my best regards.
I will.
Yeah.
Hey, you have a good day. Thanks for everything, and Mia was really really cool in connecting us. And I will send you. Takes me a little while to edit this stuff. I'll send you a link when I'm finished up. I usually do kind of a little behind the music editing at the start, like introducing who you are, blah, 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 and then the interview starts.
Super.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Burke. Nice to meet you. And
you too.
I look forward to seeing your podcast.
Yeah. It'll be both YouTube and a podcast without video. That's how we're doing.
Great.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Marvelous.
Cool. All right. I'll see you later. Thanks again.
You bet.